In 43 days, American pilots destroyed an entire air force. The Iraqis flew over 800 combat aircraft. Not one of them shot down a single coalition plane in air-to-air combat. Not one. January 17th, 1991, 2:38 local time. The desert sky over western Iraq is black and absolute. No moon. Temperature at altitude, minus 45 degrees Celsius. At 30,000 feet, the air is so thin that an unprotected human being loses consciousness in 12 seconds. Inside the cockpit of an F-15C Eagle, Captain John Kelk of the 33rd Tactical Fighter Wing checks his radar display. The scope is alive. Multiple contacts, closing fast. Iraqi MiG-29s, the most advanced fighters Saddam Hussein owns, scrambled to intercept the first wave of coalition aircraft crossing into Iraqi airspace. Kelk has been flying for 11 hours already. He will be flying for 4 more. This is the opening night of Operation Desert Storm, and what is about to happen in the next 90 seconds will set the tone for everything that follows. It will be the first aerial kill of the war. It will be accomplished with a missile fired from beyond visual range in total darkness against a pilot who never knew he was being tracked. It will take less time than it takes to read the sentence, but to understand why this night is happening at all, why 2,000 coalition aircraft are crossing into Iraqi airspace at this precise moment, why the most powerful air armada assembled since World War II has been sitting on Saudi tarmac for 5 months. You need to understand what Saddam Hussein built, and why the men sent to destroy it were both terrified and absolutely certain they would win. In 1991, the Iraqi Air Force is not a paper tiger. It is the 6th largest air force on the planet. Over 900 aircraft, more than 40,000 personnel, a layered air defense network, SA-2, SA-3, SA-6, Roland and Roland, 2 surface-to-air missile batteries, integrated with over 3,000 anti-aircraft artillery pieces linked by a French-built command and control network called CARI. The Iraqis have been fighting a war against Iran for 8 years. Their pilots have combat experience. Their ground controllers are trained. Their radar network covers every approach corridor into Iraqi territory. And at the top of the Iraqi fleet sits something that genuinely worries American planners, the MiG-29 Fulcrum. The MiG-29 is a revelation of Soviet engineering. Twin engines, helmet-mounted sight, the R-73 Archer missile, a weapon so agile it can track targets at 45 degrees off the aircraft's nose, meaning an Iraqi pilot can look sideways at an American jet and fire. Its radar can track multiple targets simultaneously. Its infrared search and track system can find a heat source, like an F-15's engine, without emitting a single radar pulse, invisible until it fires. American intelligence estimates suggest Iraq has between 30 and 40 operational MiG-29s. If even a fraction of them are flown by competent pilots in coordinated tactics, they represent a genuine threat to coalition aircraft. General Chuck Horner, commanding coalition air forces from a bunker in Riyadh, knows this. His planners have war-gamed the opening night scenarios dozens of times. The models consistently produce the same answer. The first 48 hours will be the most dangerous. If the Iraqi air defense network survives the opening, strikes largely intact, if Iraqi pilots get into the air in numbers before coalition aircraft can establish dominance, the casualty numbers could be severe. severe enough to shake public support for the war, severe enough to matter. So, the plan that Horner's staff builds, codenamed Instant Thunder, later evolved into the Full Air Campaign, is designed around one brutal principle. Do not give the Iraqi Air Force time to react. Hit everything simultaneously. Hit it so hard, so fast, and from so many directions that the Qari network collapses before it can coordinate a response. To execute that plan, Horner has the F-15C Eagle, and the men who fly it have been waiting for this night for their entire careers. The F-15C Eagle is, in January 1991, the finest air superiority fighter ever built. Not the fastest, not the most maneuverable in a close turning fight, but in the environment where modern air combat actually happens, beyond visual range, at night, in weather, against multiple simultaneous threats. Nothing on Earth comes close. Its AN/APG-70 radar can detect a fighter-sized target at over 100 miles. It can track 24 targets simultaneously and engage 8 of them at once. Its electronic warfare suite, the Tactical Electronic Warfare System, detects, identifies, and jams enemy radar emissions automatically, without pilot input. The aircraft weighs 18,000 kilograms fully loaded and climbs to 30,000 feet in under a minute. Its engines produce 23,770 pounds of thrust each. In an emergency, a pilot can point the nose straight up and accelerate. It carries 4 AM-7 Sparrow radar-guided missiles and 4 AM-9 Sidewinder heat seekers. In 1991, a new weapon is also available in limited numbers, the AIM-120AMRAAM, a fire-and-forget active radar missile that doesn't require the launching aircraft to continue illuminating the target. You fire it and maneuver. The missile finds its own way. The pilots who fly these aircraft are the product of a training system that was rebuilt from the ground up after Vietnam. After that war, the United States Air Force examined its kill ratios against North Vietnamese pilots, many of them flying Soviet aircraft with Soviet advisors, and found the numbers humiliating. American pilots, flying superior aircraft, were killing at a ratio barely above 1-to-1. The problem wasn't the planes, it was the training. The result was Red Flag, the most realistic air combat training exercise in the world, conducted over the Nevada desert against aggressor pilots flying Soviet-style tactics in Soviet-profile aircraft. By 1991, every F-15 pilot in the Gulf has been through Red Flag multiple times. They have fought mock battles against pilots specifically trained to kill them. They have lost those battles in training and learned why. They carry that knowledge into Iraqi airspace on the night of January 17th. Captain Kelk's radar locks, his RWR radar warning receiver, is silent. The MiG-29 ahead of him doesn't know he's there. He squeezes the trigger. The strike package that crosses into Iraq at H hour is the largest coordinated air assault since the Normandy invasion. Over 160 coalition aircraft in the first wave alone. F-15 ES carrying precision munitions to destroy airfields and command bunkers. F-4 G Wild Weasels hunting SAM radar emitters with HARM anti-radiation missiles. EF-111 Ravens and EA-6B Prowlers, blasting the electromagnetic spectrum with jamming so dense that Iraqi radar operators see nothing but static. F-117 Nighthawks, stealth aircraft so radar absorbent they appear on Iraqi screens as objects roughly the size of a steel ball bearing, moving silently toward the Qari network's central nodes. And weaving through all of it, the F-15Cs, Pure air superiority. No bombs, no ground attack role. Their only job, kill anything that flies. At 2:38, Captain Kelk's AIM-7 Sparrow finds its target. The MiG-29 ahead of him disappears from his radar scope in the way that means only one thing. First kill of the war. Kelk keys his radio. Splash 1. In the next 4 minutes, 2 more Iraqi aircraft are destroyed by F-15 pilots in his flight. By dawn, the score is staggering. In the first 12 hours of the war, Iraqi aircraft attempt multiple intercepts. Each one is detected at long range by F-15 radar. Each one is engaged before the Iraqi pilot can visually acquire his opponent. Each engagement follows the same template: detection, lock, missile away, splash. The Iraqi pilots are not flying poorly. They are flying into a system that negates everything they know how to do. One Iraqi MiG-25 pilot, flying the fastest interceptor in the Iraqi inventory, a machine capable of Mach 3.2, turns to engage an F-15. His radar finds it. He launches a missile. The missile misses. The F-15 pilot, having received the radar warning, has already maneuvered and fired his own shot. The MiG-25 is destroyed 11 seconds after its missile leaves the rail. By the end of the first day, Iraqi air defense controllers are telling their pilots to stay on the ground. The sky belongs to the coalition. And then, Saddam Hussein does something that no one in coalition intelligence has predicted. He runs. Beginning January 26th, 9 days into the air campaign, Iraqi aircraft begin departing for Iran in numbers, not fleeing a specific battle, not responding to a tactical emergency. By deliberate order, the Iraqi Air Force starts moving its best aircraft to Iranian airfields, where coalition forces cannot follow without triggering a second war. The exodus is extraordinary. MiG-29s, Su-24 Fencers, Su-25 Frogfoots, Mirage F-1s. Over the course of several days, more than 130 Iraqi aircraft fly east across the border and land at Iranian bases. Their pilots shut down the engines, climb out, and are immediately interned by Iranian authorities. Iraq and Iran have just finished 8 years of war with each other. The welcome is not warm. The aircraft are impounded. Many of them will never fly again under any flag. For coalition pilots, the exodus creates a different problem. A desperate, chaotic flood of aircraft, all moving in the same direction. Some of them broadcasting emergency transponder codes, some of them flying without any electronic identification at all. The rules of engagement require positive identification before firing. F-15 pilots intercept fleeing Iraqi jets at close range. Visual identification, cockpit to cockpit. Then watch them cross the border, unable to fire. One F-15 pilot describes pulling alongside a fleeing Iraqi Mirage F-1 at 500 knots. Close enough to see the Iraqi pilot's helmet, close enough to count the missiles on his wings. The Iraqi pilot looks across at the American. Neither man moves for a long moment. Then, the Mirage accelerates and disappears east. The F-15 pilot turns back toward Iraq. But not all Iraqi pilots choose to run. A small number, a very small number, decide to fight. And those engagements, lost in the overwhelming statistics of the air campaign, contain some of the most compressed and violent aerial combat of the entire war. Captain Robert Grader, 36th Tactical Fighter Wing, January 27th. 2 Iraqi Mirage F-1s, flying low to avoid radar, trying to reach the Saudi border with anti-ship missiles intended for coalition naval vessels in the Gulf. Grader intercepts them from above, closing at over 1,200 kilometers per hour combined. He fires an AM-9. It guides. First Mirage down. He repositions. Second Mirage brakes hard, trying to force an overshoot. Grader holds the turn, bleeding speed, maintaining the angle. AM-9 number 2. Clean impact. Total engagement time, 41 seconds. Everything that happens in the sky begins on the ground. And in the Gulf War, the ground war, the maintenance war, the logistics war, the 3 a.m. war, fought under floodlights with grease-covered hands, is as extraordinary as anything that happens at altitude. The F-15C is a complex machine. Its radar alone contains over 80,000 lines of software code. Its hydraulic system operates at 3,000 pounds per square inch. Its engines require precise fuel mixture at altitude, or they flame out. In peacetime, maintaining an F-15 at combat-ready status requires approximately 30 maintenance man-hours per flight hour. In Desert Storm, operating from Saudi bases in 50 degrees Celsius heat with sand in every seal and filter, that number goes higher. The crew chiefs, enlisted technicians who own their aircraft in every sense that matters, work shifts that do not correspond to any normal human schedule. Their pilots sleep between sorties. The crew chiefs do not sleep. They refuel. They rearm. They check every system. They replace the components that the heat has degraded. They argue with supply chains for parts that aren't there and improvise when arguing doesn't work. Sergeant First Class David Pratt, crew chief for an F-15C at Al-Kharj Air Base, describes the routine. His aircraft lands at 4 o'clock. By 4:45, it is refueled, rearmed with 4 fresh AIM-7s and 4 AIM-9s, oils checked, radar cooling system inspected, and ready for the next sortie. His pilot sleeps until 7:30. At 8:15, that aircraft is back in the air. Pratt does this 7 days a week for 43 days. When the war ends and his pilot shakes his hand on the flight line, the pilot says, "You kept me alive." Pratt will say later that this is not accurate. What kept the pilot alive, Pratt insists, was the aircraft. What kept the aircraft flying was the crew. What kept the crew going was, and here he pauses, he doesn't actually know. Habit, maybe. Stubbornness. The knowledge that somewhere over Iraq, his airplane is the thing between his pilot and the ground. That is enough. By the time the ground war begins on February 24th, the Iraqi Air Force, as a fighting force, has ceased to exist. The numbers are clinical and total. In 43 days of air combat, F-15 pilots alone account for 32 confirmed aerial kills, every single Iraqi aircraft destroyed in air-to-air combat during Desert Storm. The final tally: 5 MiG-29s, 2 MiG-25s, 2 MiG-23s, 6 MiG-21s, 8 Mirage F-1s, 1 Su-7, 4 Su-22s, and a collection of other types. Coalition air losses to Iraqi air-to-air fire: 0. Not reduced, not minimal, 0. It is the most lopsided air superiority campaign in the history of modern warfare. The pilots who achieved this are not superhuman. The squadron histories from Desert Storm are full of the same material that fills every combat history: fear, exhaustion, mechanical failures at the worst possible moments, radios that cut out, missiles that don't guide, moments where training and instinct are the only things operating because the conscious mind has gone somewhere quiet and small. Captain Rory Drager, who destroys 2 Iraqi aircraft in a single engagement on January 17th, describes the aftermath of his first kill. I remember thinking I should feel something, triumph, relief, something. Instead, I just thought, check fuel state, check radar, check for threats. The training takes over. You become the checklist. The feeling comes later, when you're safe, when it's over. During the fight, there's no room for feelings. There's only the next task. The Iraqi pilots who chose to fight, and a small number did, right to the end, are remembered differently on the American side than the statistics suggest. Several F-15 pilots, interviewed after the war, speak of specific Iraqi opponents with something close to professional respect. One Iraqi MiG-23 pilot, intercepted on February 7th, turns into his attacker rather than running. A brave and tactically correct response that nearly forces the F-15 pilot into a close turning fight where the advantage narrows. The F-15 pilot wins. The Iraqi does not survive, but the American remembers him. He knew what he was doing, the pilot says. He just didn't have the equipment to make it matter. The Gulf War air campaign changes everything. It changes what nations believe is possible from air power. It changes how armies are designed, how air forces are trained, how wars are planned. And it changes, in ways that will only become clear years later, what the United States believes about itself and its military power. The lessons that coalition planners draw from Desert Storm are not wrong exactly. Precision air power, delivered by well-trained crews against an integrated air defense network, can achieve results that previous generations would have considered impossible. The F-15 performs beyond the expectations of even its most optimistic advocates. The stealth technology in the F-117 rewrites the rules of what radar can and cannot protect. The integration of electronic warfare, strike packages, and air superiority into a single coordinated campaign produces results in 43 days that military planners had estimated might take months. But some lessons drawn are too large. The Gulf War produces a belief, in Washington, in think tanks, in the corridors where defense budgets are decided, that air power alone can be decisive, that wars can be won from altitude, cleanly, without the grinding cost of ground combat. This belief will shape American military strategy for the next 2 decades. It will be tested in Kosovo, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, again, in 2003. The results will be more complicated. The Iraqi Air Force that survived, those 130-plus aircraft that flew to Iran, sits on Iranian airfields for years. Some are eventually returned. Most are absorbed. The pilots who flew them spend the war in Iranian internment, which is not comfortable. Several of them never return to Iraq. Their families wait. The Iraqi government, for reasons of its own, does not prioritize bringing them home. For the American pilots who flew Desert Storm, the aftermath is its own kind of complicated. They come home to parades and recognition that Vietnam veterans never received. They are celebrated. Their kill ratios are quoted in congressional testimony. Several of them become generals. Several become test pilots. Several leave the Air Force and fly commercial airliners and think about their years in the Eagle the way men think about the best and most frightening years of their lives. Captain John Kelk, the man who fired the first air-to-air missile of Desert Storm, who opened the aerial campaign in the darkness over Iraq at 2:38 on January 17th, gives interviews for years afterward. He is consistently asked the same question. What was it like, that first shot, the first kill? He gives different answers at different times, But one version stays consistent. The radar showed a target, he says. I did what I was trained to do. The missile guided. The target disappeared. And then I was already looking for the next one. That is the F-15 pilot's version of Desert Storm. Clean, professional, methodical. The Iraqi version of the same night is harder to reconstruct because most of the men who lived it are gone, and those who survived don't always speak to American journalists, but in the fragments that have emerged, in interviews, in memoirs, in the occasional declassified document, a picture forms of pilots who knew what was coming, who flew anyway, who died in darkness without ever seeing the aircraft that killed them. They flew into a system that had been designed specifically and deliberately to make their skill and their courage irrelevant. That is what air superiority looks like when it works. Not heroic, not glorious, efficient. The sky is not a fair place. It never has been. The men who fight there know this better than anyone, and the ones who come home carry that knowledge quietly, in the same way that men carry all the things they cannot explain to people who were not there, in the pause before the answer, in the careful choice of words, in the look that crosses their face when someone asks what it was like. It was 2:38. The desert was dark. The radar showed a target. They did what they were trained to do.